Hello, welcome to the September 7th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through okay. Hello, welcome to the September. All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring stream. I'm going to just kind of switch a couple of views here, my monitoring laptop, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply ask the questions in the chat field. We'll try to get through all the questions as completely and as succinctly as possible. Realize that the questions can get ahead of my ability to answer them in a real-time manner. So at certain points in the live stream, I may be 30 to 40 minutes behind. I'll try to give periodic updates as to where I am in the questions versus the real time. And as asked, so with that in mind, if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that will only kind of slow down the whole process and will kind of not allow us to get through as many topics. And when you ask your questions, if you could simply indicate which version of Cubase it is, which operating system. Sometimes that information is helpful as well. So you can say I'm running Cubase Elements 11 or Cubase Pro 10.5 on Mac Big Sur, or I'm running it on Windows 10. You know, that information is helpful. Like many of you, my other members of my family are home, so I'll try to avoid any interruptions and keep them to as small as possible. But you may hear my wife above me who's on conference calls throughout our live stream, and my son is at school but will probably be home for the last half hour or so. But we'll try to get through as many things without interruptions. Just want to give a special shout out to a couple people that help with the live stream. So first, we see he's on the live stream already. So we have Jan from Stockholm at cubaseindex.com. So we will try to have the topics with timestamps of all of everything that we discussed today in the live stream posted in the comments field, and it'll be pinned to the top. But if you want to search for previous topics covered in all of the previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan is been kind enough to keep that up and maintain that. That's a wonderful resource. So you could just kind of search. We have two people that serve as moderators. We usually have a very well-behaved group. Occasionally we get some straggler in, causes a little bit of problems, but we want to thank Agent K and Jazz Dude for serving as moderators and for answering questions ahead of the stream as I'm kind of working my way towards them. And also, if you want another wonderful resource of information on Steinberg products, you can check out the Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work with that. So if you're looking for particular tutorials, there's all sorts of great ones there. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started. I noticed that before, I think it may have gotten kind of taken away. It was entered into the chat field maybe about an hour and 15 minutes before the live stream, but someone had asked about getting VST Connect Pro working, recording on the same network, and if there's any tricks and how to do that. So the trick is, if you have the VST Connect Performer, and we could do this with VST Connect Pro where we could record on the same network. So if you wanted to record someone on the same network but maybe in a different recording studio, the trick is to get this to work and I'm not kind of logged in with my VST Connect Performer, but you'll see this little share icon, this little icon right here. Right click, and if you're both on the same network, you'll see the IP address. So instead of searching by the My Steinberg account or by the number, just right click here, and then you'll see the IP address pop up for the other computer, and then that will connect you when recording on the same network. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. And also, if you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And if this is your first live stream, let us know that as well. All right, so we see we have Agent K, we have Daryl from Oakland. Great to see you. We have Jan, we have Tim Weinheimer, Fred Robinson from Norwich in the UK. We have Agent K, Filter Freak. On a gorgeous sunny evening in the south of the UK. We have Matt Elston from London. All right, so we have Best Korean Jesus on as well. Jazz Dude. We see Michael Marshall from Somerset. Okay, Robbie Bowling from Dallas. Thermonuclear War. From Serbia. Sorry, my chat field already. All right. All right, so we have Sir Robert from Atlanta. Good to see you. Glad you could join us. All right, we have Uno Memento from Finland. Okay, so we have a question from Marcos Gomez. Greg, if I buy Yamaha H7s, I guess HS7s, and EQ in a way to compensate for the Fletcher-Munson curve to work quiet with big bass and air monitors, will accept or can crash. How to prevent woofers or tweeters to fail. So I think, you're going to have, I believe that, the amplifiers in the HS7s, basically will have a hard time actually, failing or, causing problems. Yamaha gear is pretty much, pretty heavily over-engineered. So I don't think, there may be protection circuits in there to automatically stop that. That would be something the Yamaha would definitely do. I could check with some of my colleagues if you wanted to email me right after, but generally, the HS7s, I've seen lots of my friends kind of have migrated to them as a very cost-effective but great monitor after going from much more expensive monitors, and they all seem to love them. All right. Okay, so we have Graham Witchers joining early, and he's already looking for Michael Teens for his for ice cream, the virtual ice cream. We have Michael Pierce joining. See that Michael Pierce has first full day behind Cubase 11 today, and he really liked it with lots of cool new features. It's great. All right, so Marcos is checking in from Sao Paulo. We have Wieko Muggy checking in from Indonesia. We have Paolo checking in from Portugal. All right, and we have Papa Niberio from Australia. Thanks for joining us. We realize it's very late there. All right, so we have a question. Cubase 11 Pro Mac. Is there any way to get Download Assistant to talk to the library manager so it can gray out stuff you already have loaded? Maybe a future request. So I think they'll be kind of migrating between those two systems, but a lot of times when you go to the Download Assistant, I'll just open this up here. A lot of times it will indicate if the particular aspect or the program is installed, I believe. So it's good. Just take a quick look. So like when I look at different stuff like here, I could just see, install again directly from my Download Assistant. So I'm not sure if that carries over. I don't think I installed everything here from Download Assistant, but I think that like as you would download different elements, that it would automatically that it might just say install again. But I think as we kind of move towards new systems for this, that we'll see kind of tighter integration with that. So we've seen changes, kind of automatical, we've seen more integration coming over time. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer from North Carolina. All right, and we have Mac from West Indies and Mark from Sri Lanka. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut, if I may ask, are both the Steinberg Vintage Channel Strip plugin suite and Steinberg Vintage Open Deck plugin suite offered a suiteware already in Nuendo Cubase? So those plugins are sold separately, and those if you're asking if those functions, if those particular plugins are already included with Cubase or Nuendo, the answer would be no. So they're kind of separate VCM plugins developed by Yamaha. Okay, so we just see from Marcos Gomez, I live in an apartment, and this is probably his question about the Fletcher Munson, and it's not treated, so it can't be loud. I don't like to work loud. I work around 60 to 67 dB SPL, so for compensate for the FM curve, I wish to use this trick. I would, probably using like a Fletcher Munson, like the FM radio curve is, I'm not sure if that's really a Fletcher Munson, but with the FM curve, I would probably, worry about more position of your monitors. I think you can mix very effectively at low volumes and just kind of, be very familiar with what your speakers are hearing. So, one of my, probably one of the most highly regarded mix engineers in the world mixes incredibly soft. And, he gets paid way more money than, in a week than I do in a year for working on a project. So, so I would try to just be familiar with what it's sounding like and know what your actual monitors sound like instead of worrying about trying to compensate for like bass that's not going to be there because of volume. So, all right. So we see Chris Hallam is also indicating that he has a pair of white HS7 monitors and he loves them. All right. So we see a question from Jeff Sabelski. Hi. When can an audio clip be considered a sample that could be dragged into Halion 6? I select an audio slice from an audio clip in Cubase Pro, but Halion won't accept it in the sample window. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So I think Halion will load up like the complete WAV file. So let's say if I want to come over here to... let's say Halion 6 here. So a lot of times when we deal with slices of audio files, so let's just pull in a quick loop here. Okay, so let's say now if I have created slices of this, so it could really depend how the slices have been created. So if I go, let's say, into my sample editor, so let's say if I just at this point go to my hit points and we say create slices, I think that these will basically be the particular slices, but let's go ahead and give it a shot. So I will just kind of start quickly, and then let me just. Okay, so let's say if I drag this over. So we'll go to our sample zone. And we can see that this is, since this audio file has automatically been sliced, it's taking the whole audio file, but just basically, playing from that particular portion. Now, I think if we do the slices, let's come over here and let's say if we go to our hit point editor in the sample, and I think if we choose to create events, that now when we drag over, let's say if I come here, I'll just take this particular So now let's say if we go to let me just go to remove a couple of these. So now that we have done these as sections, it's still going to be there. So you might have to, Jeff, just kind of come over here. And since this is still just like a different segment, but a portion of the particular audio file, so probably if you come here and just say, let's go to bounce selection. So we'll go to audio menu to bounce selection, and then we could replace and create a new audio file. So let's say, so now that I've created a new audio file, we can just drag this over. And now when we go to editing of the sample, we only see that particular portion. So otherwise it's going to, as you drag it in, it's going to be just a reference point for the start and end. So it'll have to be just kind of a separate audio file event, because Hallian can reference the entire audio file for you. All right, so we see Philip from Tennessee running Cubase 11 on a MacBook Pro 16-inch Catalina. Cubase 11 seems to use a lot of my GPU. Is that normal for Cubase 11? Is there a known cause of GPU spikes? So a lot of times it could be, so if you're seeing it on your GPU, so it could be depending on, like, if you're running, external displays, that can make a big difference as well. It's how much it's actually redrawing, and some plugins could cause that. But I haven't really come across. I'm running just a 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I haven't really come across like GPU issues. Some third-party plugins may be causing that. So if but if you could tell us if you're experiencing it with third-party plugins or just stock Cubase plugins. All right, we have a question. Have you information about M1 support for Nuendo 11? So it currently runs under Rosetta, but there's a lot of work being done to make it more M1 support. So we'll see as it happens. But I know that the teams are working hard on it. So. All right, so we just see how reliable is Yamaha HS5 compared to KRK, RP8 4th generation. So I think you'd probably find that, Yamaha stuff probably has I think, has a well-deserved reputation for high quality production and manufacturing that probably exceeds its price point just because they make more products than any other company. But, they generally tend to be a bit over-engineered. And we see other people kind of echoing those comments there. Okay, so we just see a question from Fred Robinson. Can you show how to use a commercial track as a reference track? The issue is that the commercial tracks are mastered, but my mixes are not yet. So how do you kind of unmaster the commercial track? It's not that you want to necessarily unmaster the commercial track, but we'll show you kind of a technique that I use for doing this. Let me just... see if I have this project in my recent projects list. If not, I'll just... So often the issue gets to be of using if you have a mastered project versus kind of your project. So you can't necessarily, unburn the steak per se. But let's say if I have... I'll take one of my friends, Clay Oswald's tracks from 7th Crossing. So there is kind of a trick to use the control room. Now, often what you want to do is to avoid processing the master track through your plugin chain. So let's say if I have a particular track here... So let's say here we have, I'll do just a quick reference. So let's say this is a reference track here. So if I select this, what I want to do is basically tell this to go to no bus. And I'm going to create just in my control room a little function where we can say, okay, I want to go to my audio connections, and under the control room, we're going to have just a reference mix. So I'll just remove this and we'll show it from scratch. So I want to add what's called a talkback mic or a cue. We're going to add a cue rather. So we'll make this stereo, and I'm going to call this reference. Okay. And I really don't need to have that physically connected anywhere. So what I want to do is to take this particular track, and in the cue sends, let me just check which one is my reference. Again, here in order. So I'm going to come to the audio connections. So we're going to have our reference is our second. Okay. So now when we play, this isn't going to our main bus where we may have processing, but it's going to go to, let's say, our reference bus. So I'm going to, let's just put like a really odd EQ on this just to differentiate. So let's say as we're playing. So if I go to solo in the mix console of this particular track. So we won't necessarily hear it, but if we go to control room 2, we're only hearing this reference track. So we're going to hear this with the EQ. So let's say that's our reference track that we want to go. And really all you need to do is just go between my mix and the reference track. So in essence, what we're doing is we're not unmastering the track, but we're making sure that if you have processing in the main mix on the two bus here, that this processing is not going to be processed through through the Q mix. So if I had all my processing here, I'm not taking this track and just playing it back through my master channel. It's going through the control room. So again, I can come over here, listen to my mix, click right here. This track is playing the reference, and as we just go back and forth, we could check the levels, make sure sonically it's okay. So it's not necessarily unmastering the original mix, but it's not processing your mastered mix through another set of processing, which is often the case. So that way we could just, A/B between those two, and, you could use a keyboard shortcut to just switch between monitoring your mix versus the reference mix. So that's an effective way, I think, to work with reference material inside of Cubase. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Dallas LaRue. I can't figure out how to set my Akai Mini up for automation, not on a plugin, but on volume automation on the track. Thanks, Greg. So a lot of times you might just have to use kind of a generic remote. So I'm not sure if your Akai Mini is actually doing Mackie control, but if it's doing Mackie control, you can go to the studio setup and just come right over here and add a Mackie control and then set it up. So if I probably have a Mackie control here, and then you could set that up. If it doesn't have a Mackie control, you could go to like a generic remote. So let's say, okay, now I want it to take this slider on my, so I'm going to just click on learn. So this is the incoming MIDI message. So you can click on learn, and I'll just capture this. Let's say this is coming from my panorama. Okay, so as I move this particular parameter, it's captured the MIDI CC that's being transmitted by the device, and I want this to control the VST mixer for kick, and so I could just hit apply, and as we just wanted to come here, I can now, just using my MIDI fader, control the volume. So if it doesn't work as a Mackie control, just set up a generic remote, learn the incoming MIDI message, and tell it what track and what parameter that you wanted to automate. And then you could use any MIDI function, any MIDI controller, to just come over there and control the volume for your tracks very easily. So we have a question from Ted Springham. When saving a project, is there an alert for audio used that's not in the pool, so you know it's not self-contained? So there isn't a function for that on saving the project. If you do a backup project, that will automatically consolidate. And move everything. As audio is added to Cubase, you could have it as a preference under editing audio to automatically copy all files. So editing audio, copy all files to the project folder. And if, before saving, if you wanted to, you could also go into the pool window. So let's say if we go to our pool, and if we have audio files that are scattered all throughout, we could just simply say, prepare archive, and that archive will then move everything into the common project audio files folder so that you can then save. But, saving the project doesn't necessarily migrate it, but there are, a couple ways to do it. As audio is put into the project or recorded, that's automatically put into the project folder. You could do it directly from the pool or do an export audio mixdown to catch it as well. So usually once people have the preference set up, then everything is automatically going into the project folder. All right, so we have from Sven, a couple streams ago, I asked about detailed documentation regarding Steinberg's implementation of the Mackie control protocol. Have you managed to find an answer? So, when you sent over, I believe, and I'm trying to get this confirmed still, and some people were on vacation, but, like when you go to put the Mackie control in Cubase mode, that's actually done by Mackie. And it may have been done kind of in conjunction, but when you're doing the scrubbing, you can set any control. So I think you said it was doing controller 60, and as you moved like the scrub wheel to the right or left, it would send like a value of controller 60 and 0 if you go to the left, and 64 if you go to the right. But it doesn't do any varying value, so it's just going to do one static value. And I think that's a limitation of the Mackie control protocol, as opposed to something like Yukon or what Nuage or the CC121 does, where it has variable amounts. So a lot of it, I think, and I remember as Mackie control is being implemented, we had to wait for Mackie to do the control protocol for different DAWs. So I believe that their choice of what parameter that they chose was actually picked by Mackie. So it's not going to have varying values to speed up and slow down, kind of the, like as you do scrubbing, like if you're using it kind of in the scrub wheel, it's just going to do kind of like one particular value, I think, because it's only transmitting one value. So, and as you sent over in the screenshots, it's just sending the same Midi continuous controller as you go up or down. So that's just going to be kind of a static value and not increasing or decreasing, because the actual protocol isn't transmitting that. So I'm still waiting to kind of hear back from one developer who's on vacation. So, but I'm pretty sure that's how it was done. And I just see a follow up, why are manufacturers treating this info like a state secret? So it's really, it's probably Mackie that's doing it, and it's probably to maybe protect their intellectual property, even though many people have kind of backward engineered the protocol. So. All right, so we have a question. Sorry, my time field just jumped. Okay, question. In Cubase 11 Artist Windows 10, is there a quick way to insert all recorded MIDI chords from a track to chord pads, or do you have to manually play each chord into the pad? So I think if you wanted to just come, let's say if I wanted to take, let's see if we have, just do another project here quickly. So you don't have to do that. I think this will work in Artist 11 as well, but I would try this. All right, so try just to select the part and then go to your project menu to chord track and say create chord symbols. And then that will automatically just add the chord track for you and populate the chord track based on the MIDI track. So that way, so give that a try. So once again, project to chord track to create chord symbols. All right, so Razel checking in from Denmark. I'm glad you can join us. All right, so I see we want vocal template. So there's probably, let's just take a look and say new project. So probably if you go to recording, you could probably just come right over here. There's, piano and vocal, acoustic guitar and vocal. So there's templates that are kind of already built in. So say if you want to go to production, you could say, pop production, R&B production, and this would have, for a lot of, electro production for vocals. So there's kind of a lot of templates already built in, and also lots of different track presets if you don't want to make your own. All right, so we have a question. Question: how to assign the listen button to an external MIDI control? I tried both with macro shortcut and looking for it in generic remote list, but it doesn't work. Okay, so let's say we'll come over here. All right, so let's see. I'll just go to my controller here. Let me just see if this particular button that I'm going to press is actually transmitting a MIDI message. Okay, so let's say I'm going to hit this button and let's take a look for it to see if we could do listen mode. Okay, so we'll come over here. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, let's go to. All right, so it's just found under. So it seems to be working. So go to Command to Mixer, and then listen for all visible channels on or off. So, and as you can see that when I just do that, if I go to this, if I go to a different track, so let me just try it with more audio. You only have one audio track in that particular project, but so that will do for all visible tracks. Let's see if we can. All right, so say I have this track selected. I'm going to look under key commands. Okay, it's maybe under edit. So let's go to command. Okay, so maybe under command, edit, listen. So let's say on the selected track, yeah. So whatever channel you have selected, transmit that, and then look under command, edit, and then listen. So you could just enable it there. Okay, so we just see, hi Greg, just curious, what does the resolution do under the definition tab after double clicking on an audio file? So let's say we come over here. Okay, just let me see. All right, so I'm not sure if it's if you're doing the grid here, but just as you kind of do adjustments for like if you're doing like, you know, audio warping, or as you're, let's say if we're here with a grid, let's say, okay, we'll come over here. So let's say we want to do kind of eighth note grids and say, okay, we do audio warping, so we could see your definition here. So let's see, 16th note. So say as we go to like free warp, that this would automatically just kind of snap to 16th notes, I believe. And then if we go to definition, let's set this to 8th notes as I go to audio warp here. Now this would only allow us to adjust by 8th notes. I think that maybe, but let me know if that's what you're adjusting, because I don't see resolution. So if that's kind of what it's for. So let's say, so right now, as you can see, my cursor here is tied to 8th notes or to quarter notes. And now as I go, it's tied to 8th notes. And then if I go to 16th notes, I could snap to 16th notes kind of when doing editing on the grid. So if that's what you mean. So if I switch to quarter notes, now it's only going to go to quarter notes, or you can see the cursor change here kind of as it snaps now to 8ths, 16ths, etc. All right, so we see the revelation of the day was using the Q sends for reference. Okay, so we see sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so I just see from Kashmir, I think Kashmir Cat, I'm new and struggling with the editing of track instruments. It's so hard to practice editing, like adding bars, subtracting bars, copying bars, etc. Okay, so we could do a lot of this with the range tool. So let's say if I just wanted to, come right over here, let's say we have 8 measures. Okay, so I can now come over here. So let's say I've selected a range, and we could have this automatically tied to the grid if you have snap turned on. So let's say I have this set to bar. So I wanted to come here and take these 4 measures. So, you could use the range tool, and depending which version you may have, kind of a combined selection and range tool. And if you have this little orange icon enabled here, the bottom part is basically a selection tool, and the top will function as a range tool. So if I wanted to select this range, we can go to edit to range. And if I wanted to just come over here and say, okay, I just wanted to split that, I could do that. If I wanted to erase, we could now just hit delete if we wanted to. Some other functions. So let's say if I'm here and I just wanted to add bars, again, edit to range, and we could just say I wanted to insert silence, and that will basically nudge, move over those particular. So I'll undo that. So let's say, and redo it. So that will just kind of move everything over like that. So yeah, and if you wanted to subtract bars, I could say, okay, I wanted to take these, and again, go to range and just say delete time. So it seems like a lot of the functions that you want to do will be kind of using the range tool, and go to edit to range. And even if you say, okay, I only wanted this part on, I could just go to edit to range and learn these keyboard shortcuts. And you could also just say I want it to crop, and then that will throw everything before and away, or you could cut head, cut tail, So it seems like a lot of the functions that you want to do there, and this works for MIDI and audio in the project window in the same manner. Okay, it says I've created several instruments, track, and plan to put a retardando at the end of a certain bar or add some bars. I really couldn't do it. So yeah, again, if we, let's say if I just wanted to come to, I'll do just kind of a larger MIDI project. Let's see, the one I was thinking of. Just open up kind of a large orchestral. Okay, so, you know, and there's a couple of other things you could do too. So let's say, okay, I just wanted to, you know, select this range. And if you hold down, if you want to do it globally, hold down Control or Command plus Shift. So I'll just turn on my snap. So let's say, okay, I want it to come here and I just wanted to, you know, insert the bars globally. I could just come right here, go to range, and let's insert silence. And then if you wanted to, you know, let's say if we have just a tempo track, you know, really all you have to do at this point is, you know, let's say we enable our tempo track, and if you wanted to, you know, draw in tempo changes, you can just, you know, come right over here. You could choose whether this is going to be a ramp or step and draw in your retard right there. So it could be done. And as you're new, you know, there's, you know, about 10 ways to do different functions, but, you know, you could do it pretty easily inside of Cubase once you know where to look. All right, so we see from Fred Robinson, thanks, Greg. It's more, how do I get a fair reference mix? A master is always going to sound better than a mix. Is there a set of referenceable mixes somewhere? Business idea, perhaps. So there's probably not a lot of people will give you maybe their unmastered files. But I think, you know, if you're kind of in the ballpark to like your reference, and that's like really the key and probably what the client wants, you know, that, you know, it will, you know, get you about 95% of the way there. And then the mastering engineer could use tools like Wavelab for some, you know, for additional functionality. So, and there's, you know, there's references directly in there at the mastering stage that you could use, but I think that's a pretty good way to, you know, get you a lot closer. All right. All right, Jazz Dude wants people to smash the like button. So if you've learned a new trick, make sure you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, okay, so just see, hi Greg, how can I set my key command to have the left and right arrows to move events like notes, segments in the track, etc.? Used to have it that way before, but now they move the timeline. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a quick look. All right, so I think it could depend on, I'll revert this quickly. Okay, so like if we're in, okay, so I want to set the, okay, so I'm just going to read this again. How can I set the key command to have the left and right arrows to move events like notes, segments on a track? Okay. So now they move the timeline. So let's, okay, so if I come here, let's say if I move, okay. So as I just come here, let's say I just have, let's say I'm moving the events here. So I select the event and I hold down Control or Command and left and right arrows. And if I just, if I hold down Option or Alt, we could trim based on those particular events. So, but I think, you know, it could be maybe the keyboard shortcuts were changed. So let's go ahead and check your key commands. So let's say if I come here, I will. Okay, so that's going to be set to nudge right. So try going into the nudge category, and maybe you had this changed. So, you know, you can, if I just come here, I believe the default key command is just navigate to the right. So if I move this particular, if I had this cut, let's say a number of times, and I have the event selected, that I could go to the next selected event. But I think what you want to do is, like when we're at the last one, just hold down Control, and then you could nudge like the actual Control or Command. And then you could nudge the actual event, and I'll just choose this to be bars and beats, so it could be more obvious. So maybe your key commands got changed, but just like if you wanted to just move the events, just try holding down Control on Windows or Command on Mac, and that will move the events. So let me know if I understood that correctly. All right, so we see from Cashmere Cat, it says, I tried that before, but it's not simple. For example, I have 12 bars from bar 7 to 8. I want to put a retardando, and on bar 9, it should go back to original tempo. So let's say we'll go ahead and just look at tempo track here. So let's say, right at this bar, I want to start a retard. So I'll put in my tempo node here. Let me just say measure. So say I come here. And then I think, let me just make this its little. I'll just kill this. Let me just start from scratch here. So let's say I just want put a point there, and then let's say you just want this to be in ramp. And then all you have to do, that'll just do retard, and then you'll go right back. Think of this as always going to need to just, it's not like where you say, oh, to put a retard in and it does a certain percentage. You just would need to return it back to the same value, and you can see that value just by kind of clicking here. But let me also see if this works in the tempo map as well. But if I have 2 points, and let's say I do kind of a range selection, and that doesn't work in the tempo, but you could just manually kind of put in your 2 events right there and just draw that in and just have it immediately go back up to tempo and do a retard. And you may find that, it's not like just putting a retard symbol where, every retard you may have to just kind of tweak. All right, so you see a question, when is the next stream? So we usually do these streams on Tuesdays and Fridays afternoon, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. So I believe in Central Europe, that's 7 p.m. In the UK, 6 p.m. California Pacific time, that's 10 a.m. So. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so I see a question from Christopher Jetter. Hello from Indiana. My audio mixdown isn't as loud as playback in Cubase. What am I doing wrong? So make sure that when you're doing this, and this could be a pretty common thing, but a lot of times we see people that will be using their their master fader here as the monitoring volume. So let's say if we're playing back our project, and they have their master fader down here, but it's maybe cranked up in the studio, is try to set your master fader as close to 0 and try to do your gain structure there, because otherwise when you do a mix down and you have your master fader down here, it's actually, you're telling it to drop the volume. So make sure you do that. And if you wanted to control the monitoring volume, if you have Cubase Pro, use the control room, and then you can just come right over here and without affecting the gain structure of the mix. But often what people do is they come over here and they treat this as their monitoring volume, and it's their master fader. So if your master fader is down here, you're telling, when you export the audio mix down, you're telling it basically just to drop drop down by 20 dB, and that will sound like your mix down is softer. So I just see Phil T's mentioning, before I had Pro, I just used a solo option to A/B between unfastened and reference track. It's not super intuitive, but it does work. So you could do that if you don't have a lot of master effects processing on stuff, and that's kind of gets to be like one of the problems, is kind of taking a master track and running it through another mastering chain. Often it's not a fair reference. All right, Graham is saying, Graham Witcher's just saying, Cubase is just so beautiful to look at. The dark background with the wonderful colors. When it's on my large monitor, I swear it makes my music sound better. So that's good. We'll pass that along to staff. So we have just a question. Anyone aware of any audio recording certifications or degrees that use Cubase, at least in part, if not exclusively? Yeah, so like the whole film scoring program at Cubase, Diablo Community College. You know, we do a lot of stuff with New England Conservatory, Cerritos College. I know we just did like a whole Nuendo and Cubase installation and Dorico there. So there's lots of colleges that are teaching Cubase. There's just a couple I've dealt with recently. Okay, just reading through more comments. All right, great to see JVI on the live stream. All right, great that Michael Teams has made the live stream. Just see a question from Jeff Sabelski. Greg, did you ever meet Wendy Carlos? I think I met her briefly, kind of at, I think it's maybe at the Hilton in New York City during an AES show. She was at the bar at the same time I was, so met her very briefly there. And I was with my boss, Rush Jones, who did marketing for Oberheim in the heyday. So he knew her. All right, we see Michael Teams is doling out the virtual ice cream, so that's great. Okay, so we have a question from Sir Robert. Great that you could join us. Is it possible to create a macro or key command to advance or go a pre-selected length of a left-right locator by beat or measure? Move the locators by 4 or 8 bars by a key command. Okay, so let's say if I have my left and right locators. Let's say for these 2 bars, okay, let's say these. All right, so let's say, so I know you could just manually move the locators like this. Let's see if there's a way to do it with a keyboard shortcut. I usually just do it manually, but Let me just look for locator. So I don't know from a key command, and a lot of people don't know you can move it manually just by grabbing it, but let's see if maybe in a project logical editor. Yeah, so I don't know of a way to do it with the keyboard shortcut, but I'll kind of keep it in the back of my head and see if I can come up with something. But I don't know of a way moving the left and right locators manually with key command. Let me just. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. Of way to do that, but I'll see if I can play around with some more. Sorry about that, Robert. All right, so I see John Koskinen is saying L, so let me just look that up real quick. Yeah, let's locate selection start. So I see, hi Greg, I see you have a Stream Deck icon. What do you have programmed on yours? I read that there are issues with it, with Cubase, as the correct area has to be in focus for it to work. So I'm kind of working on like doing a lot of Stream Deck stuff. So I want to try to get as many functions and the keyboard shortcuts. I mean, it's true, like, depending, where you're at, the particular area needs to be in focus. But I'm kind of starting with doing all of the menus for Stream Deck with all of the sub menu functions so that people can navigate. And then I want to build kind of like MIDI editing, audio editing, vocal tuning, different scenarios, transport, tracking, kind of like little subset functions that will be working, so it could be a little tedious with the Stream Deck software doing multiple events simultaneously. You have to kind of do it one by one, which is kind of annoying, but I've been kind of working on it for a while, just on weekends and evenings that I have free. But it seems to be kind of working as expected. Obviously, if I had another program open, that key command, if the Stream Deck icon was set to, do a key command and I had a web browser open, it could do the function of the web browser, the key command in the web browser as opposed to Cubase. So. All right, so we see from Jeff Zabelski, Greg, is a tool / VST like Halligan 6 to be as prolific as a Moog sampler. Wave designers, if we control parameters with virtual knobs and sliders with hardware controllers, simply voltage manipulation. Okay. Okay, so I'm just rereading this, make sure I understand a question. Right, is a tool / VST like Halligan 6 to be as prolific as a Moog sampler. Wave designers, if we control parameters with virtual knobs and sliders with hardware controllers, simply voltage manipulation. So I guess that there could be voltage in the actual control protocol. If you're asking, like, if we're remote controlling parameters in Halligan, if that's doing voltage, but it's probably, while it may be voltage that there is power over the USB bus, I don't think it would be voltage in terms of, like, what a Moog is doing with voltage controlled amplifiers and filters. Okay, so we see from Joseph O'Brien, hi, how many interfaces can I hook up in Cubase and use at the same time? So it could really depend on if you're running on Mac, you could do, like within Core Audio, add aggregate devices. There are problems with this. One, it will compound latency for particular audio, interfaces. So the more interfaces that you have, but basically most USB interfaces aren't designed to be daisy chained, because through the USB bus, they're not going to clock. So, if we're thinking, it seems like a simple thing that, but most USB audio interfaces, if you hook up 2 or 3 USB audio interfaces, most of them tend not to be in sync with each other. So some audio interfaces, like if you're running Thunderbolt or older Firewire or PCI, you could just basically go through and stack multiple of the same interfaces. But generally, most USB interfaces don't allow you to stack them away. So on Mac, a workaround is using an aggregate device. It could be less than satisfying on a Windows platform. Some people use ASIO and number for all, ASIO for all, and that will allow you to use multiple interfaces. But again, it's not so satisfying. It doesn't work so well because the interfaces aren't really designed to be run together to keep them synchronized, which is really important inside of Cubase. All right, so we see Gareth is on the live stream. And he's thanking me for the beautiful bass for Origin Story. So yeah, it was a fun song to play with. Hope it wasn't too busy for you or anything. So glad you like it. Thanks for sending it over for me to play on. Nice piece. I'm glad that you could join the live stream. As Michael Pierce describes, the timing would be rather ropey. Such a great British way to say it. All right, we see Captenergy Music from Pennsylvania. It's great. We see Pablo's doing a gig tonight, so we'll send him our best wishes. Okay, so we see maybe a dumb question here. How can you be sure the music note of the sound we want to sample? Is it still C3 when you record a sound to make a synth example? So really, if you don't know what the note is, of, let's say you just have kind of like, a pitch. There's a couple of ways to figure out kind of, so let's say if I just want to come here to the note, so let's say I wanted to figure out kind of maybe what a particular note is that I want to deal with. So one way is if you just go to Vary Audio and have it do an analysis. So if you drop a particular pitch in, you could do that if it's kind of maybe a one note synth thing. Let's say if I just wanted to come over to all right, so let's say if I wanted to just take like that synth and I want to take one of the notes. So let's say I just wanted to isolate it to one particular note here. So we'll just, so let's take just the very first note here. So I'll take my snap off and could just find this particular pitch. So a lot of times people may do like a quick sample and realize that the notes that they're playing are the wrong notes because the pitch, may have gone to like kind of a generic C3, but that may not be the pitch. So let's say if I just wanted to, I wanted to take that particular note, so I'm going to just turn this into its own audio file by doing a bounce selection. So let's say at this point, if I drag this note to the sampler track, by default, it will probably drag it to C3, but that may not be the pitch. So let's say if we go to Vary Audio here, we can see that this would be probably an E3. So as we look at this, and we hover over, so this would be E3. So now when I drag this into the sampler track, I would want to just come right over here and set its root note, let's say to E3, and now you could just kind of play. Another method of doing this that may work, you could try, is going to the audio menu and go to statistics. And often here you can see like an estimated pitch. So it's saying, E5, so you could also just, try both of those methods to determine the pitch of the sample and then just set the corresponding sampler track, corresponding. So let's say if I just want to come here into the sampler track, I could, and let's say, okay, let's just set this to E5. And now, we could just kind of set up and just play the correct pitch. And that way the pitch will actually line up to what you're playing. Okay, so Gareth is saying there's some discussion of hitting, so he wants people to hit the like button. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, it's just kind of reading through more comments here, so thanks again. Okay, so we see Greg. Hi, sir. How can I see the core audio device settings, input output configuration for an aggregate device and a Mac for two different devices? Okay, so it's going to be done in the audio MIDI setup. So, and that's going to be found if you go applications, and it's hidden well under utilities and probably hasn't been updated since 10.2. But let's get to your audio MIDI setup. And this will be like the incredibly unintuitive Okay, so if you click on the plus sign here, you can create an aggregate device. So once the aggregate device is set up, you could then define, so let's say I'll just come here and say, okay, I want to create an aggregate device and I wanted it to contain, you know, my USB audio codec and a display port. And so now if I go to Cubase, I would just set Cubase up. Once we have all the inputs and outputs, the device is configured. You go to your studio setup, and here you'll see aggregate device as your ASIO device, as opposed to seeing the individual one here. So that's how you could get the aggregate devices set up to run two interfaces at once with core audio. So I see from Sven just saying you can make Stream Deck automatically follow which application is in focus on the computer. Do you want me to mail you instructions on how to do this? Yeah, so I have that configured with my Stream Deck, but but by default, if you had other applications open, you didn't have it set up that way. So. But thanks. Right, so you see that John Koskinen put forward a typo, so no problem. All right, great to see Charles K on the live stream and Cubase Junkie as well. All right, so we see that Jeff Sabelski was wanting to sample his neighbor's dog. So yeah, I want to get a little more creative with neighbors, doing your own sampling sessions, kind of reading an article with Hans Zimmer saying, why don't people make their own sounds more? So. All right, so I think I might be kind of might be towards the end of questions that are set up as they are. So let me go ahead and I'm about an hour and a half in. So okay, so I know we had some questions that were mailed in. So let me go ahead and jump to those. I'm kind of caught up with the number there of the live questions so far. So let's go to some of the mailed in questions. All right. So I just see, hi Greg, last time you showed us that Groove Agent can have more than one agent. Can Greg show how to add one more agents to Groove Agent and the paid version from scratch for beginner to start to use several agents? Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, so with the full version of Groove Agent, so let's say if I wanted to start with let's say like an acoustic kit, I can come right over here and okay, so now we'll have all right, so if I wanted to add another instance, another kit, I would just right click on the agent. So let's say if I wanted to do Percussion Agent on top of this. Now, if I wanted to play those together, so when I first play, this will be set to channel 1. So let's. So now, as we kind of do this, I could just say, let me just get my keyboard controller set up here quickly. All right, so now when I play this on MIDI channel 1, I'm just playing. And as you load agents up, this will be MIDI channel 1, MIDI channel 2, MIDI channel 3, and MIDI channel 4. So if I wanted to go to MIDI channel 2, so switch it back to MIDI channel 1. Then it's playing the acoustic kit. And if I wanted to go to load a third one, I could just load up, let's say, house kit. So now if I go to channel 3, so if I just, at this point, I start with one Groove Agent, and we have this on MIDI channel 1. I add 2 MIDI tracks below that. I can now, here's my house kit. When I go to MIDI channel 2, will be the Percussion Agent and the acoustic kit on MIDI channel 1. So they're all going. And if you wanted to play those all together, you could just kind of hit play. Come up with interesting patterns. And let's say if I just wanted to ungroup those. If you want to go to your pattern overview at this point, you could just say, and this way you could have different patterns. So they'll just kind of show up as different MIDI channels, and that's kind of how you could differentiate them. And again, the multi-agent is only going to be found inside of the full version of Groove Agent. Okay, so a question. My name is Alex. It was me, Ice X Music, who's asking regarding MIDI mapping issue. Here's the problem. I'm working a MacBook Pro 2015 OS X 10.13.6, Cubase Pro 11.03. In order to control Cubase, I'm using iPad connected via Touch OSC2, MIDI mapping set up as generic remote. Every time when I load a project or open a new one, I'm facing an issue where the MIDI setup for show hide VST instruments is missing, and I have to set it up over and over again. The rest of my mapping setup stays the same. Everything works fine. I've already tried to change the MIDI channel and MIDI value as well as mapping surface using Novation Impulse 61 MIDI keyboard. Please help. So sometimes, I've seen this sometimes on Mac OS if it's seeing a new device through the audio MIDI setup utility. So if I was in this situation, I would try to, take away as many of your MIDI devices. And it could be that maybe one is kind of getting loaded up. I just think 10.13.6 may not be... I don't think that this is the issue, but I'm not sure if that's a supported OS. Just one other thing. I could be mistaken on that. I'm running 10.14. I think that's kind of minimum for Cubase 11. But I would try to just, remove everything except for your, if you wanted to start with the iPad to see if that is getting the MIDI message, and, try removing all of your MIDI interfaces one at a time and see if there's one that's kind of just triggering this message. So sometimes when, stuff is loaded in different orders in the audio MIDI setup, this could trigger kind of anomalies like you're describing, and it sometimes happens in the Mac OS audio MIDI setup. But I would try, and I'm not sure if it's the MIDI message that you're getting. Okay, just getting email coming in. So it says where the MIDI setup for show hide VST instruments is missing. And also, Isaac, if you could tell us if you're starting from a template or if it's kind of starting with any instruments loaded or instruments that aren't loaded. If it's like a blank template, that would be helpful information. Okay, so we see, hello, Greg. This question, is it possible to extract Groove from audio and open it in Groove Agent SE? In other programs, we have extract Groove function. For example, I have an audio file with the drum part, which I like. Then I extract from audio and MIDI and automatically enable in drum rack. Then I could change samples and modify the patterns, something similar in Cubase. So I think we could do something very similar. So let's go ahead and open it up and take a look. Okay, so let's say I have just a blank instance of Groove Agent, and let's say I have a drum pattern here. I'll just solo this for a second. So if I wanted to take that, I could drag that loop to an instrument pad. So now I could play that particular drum loop from the instrument pad. But if I wanted to now click on this, edit, in instrument, edit, and go to slice, we could create slices. So as I create slices now, each of these slices is now basically assigned to its own pad, and this pattern is now been created for us. So if I wanted to start like this particular, I have my real drums here, and I wanted to take this pattern and so if I wanted to just kind of play that particular pattern, so now I'll come here and I could play this pattern. And so at this point, I could double click, and if I wanted to edit and kind of change the patterns around, so say I'll just select all my notes here. Okay, and I'll just extend this out to include our new copies. So if I wanted to take these particular notes and kind of just change. Scientifically, of course. And let's say I wanted these to be reversed. I could come right over here to Midi functions. So I could take kind of that same pattern here, and let's say so you could do stuff like that. And if you wanted to replace the sounds inside a Groove Agent, you know, once you have those particular sounds, I could just say, okay, I want to go back to my instrument pads, and I wanted to replace or augment. I could just come over here. So let's say, let's see, there's samples in here. To see if I can find kicks. Okay, so let's say now I want to replace those. So I'll just say, okay, let's find kick drums. And I could just choose to replace or augment. So now if I wanted to put like a different kick on these different kick sounds, I could now come over here, and as we play, I could just come right over here to the pattern. So you could do stuff like that and kind of deconstruct and reconstruct loops pretty easily. And if you have the full version of Groove Agent, you could like take all of the sounds and it could classify the sounds, and you could just have it replace one snare sound every time it sees that it's a snare, or replace the kick once and be able to do that without having to do that. And even while it's selected here, I could take each of these individual sample slices and just change the pitch as well. So I could now come here So now if I just want to play that pattern again. And of course, whatever tempo you have. So you say, okay, I want this to be, 110 beats a minute. Now when I play the pattern. So that's how you could easily kind of do the same type of thing inside of Groove Agent, Alexander. Okay, so we had a question. Thanks for your amazing Cubase videos. I've learned a huge amount from them. I have a question. Is there a reliable way to color multiple tracks at the same time in Cubase 11 Pro? I've tried many ways. The only way that works for me sometimes is to select a track in the mixer, color that one, and select the other tracks in the mixer I want to color. Okay, so let's come over here. We'll just do a new project, and we can show you a couple of ways. So let's say if I have a number, okay, so let's say I have 16 tracks here in, all right, so one thing, excuse me, is, if you have events on the project window, is make sure that you don't have any events selected. And you can do that just by clicking in an empty space. So let's say if I wanted to take these tracks here and assign them to the same color, I would go select the color tool, and then I'd see the color palette just to the right of the color tool. And then I could, whatever channels are selected, we could just change the color for all of those accordingly. Now, if you wanted to also get into doing stuff with, you could do coloring in the project logical editor. So you could say, okay, media type is equal to, or we'll say container type is equal to a track. And we could say that if you wanted to say, okay, the property is set to event is selected. And then we could say we're going to take selected tracks, and I want to set color to this color here. So at that point, I could just say, okay, and now I want it to take selected tracks and turn it to this color. So I could just boom. So you could do that and save that as a preset. And you could even go as far as, let's say I have drum kick, drum snare, drum hat. So let's say I have stuff like this. I could say, media, let's say I want to, let's say name contains, and you could set multiple parameters. Let's say drum. And what I want to do is to, so if the name of the track contains drum, I want it to be that color. So at that point, I could just say, boom. So, and you could say kick, K-I-K, K-I-C-K, snare, S-N-A-R, S-N-R, S-N, hat, high dash hat, So you could have all of these set up as various, containers, and just say, okay, this is my, so if I say name contains or is equal to hat. So you could have kind of like all your drum name and name derivations kind of defined here, and then colorize it based on conditions in the project logical editor, which could be really helpful. Okay, so just see a question. I can create track archives, but if I want to save a track preset that includes an audio track and its corresponding effects track, when I load it, it only brings in the audio track. Why is that? What's the difference with track archives, and which is the correct way to save a multi-track chain? Okay, so let's say, I'll just jump back to this project here. Okay, so we could think of track presets as containing, all of the insert effects, all of the channel strip effects, the EQ, the volume, the panning status. And so if I, said, if the singer came back and says, I really loved the vocals on this particular song, you could, just simply have each of those set as a track preset and call that up. Now, what it doesn't contain is something that's contingent or something that relies on another track. And this could be doing something like an effect send. So, so if I wanted to include an effect send, so let's say I really like this vocal sound with the reverb. So let's say now I'll just revert this quickly. So let's say when I solo this also includes the reverb. So if I wanted to carry those two together so that they're kind of intrinsically linked, at this point, I could just select both of those channels holding down control. So I'm going to select both the effects channel and the vocal. And what I'm going to do is to just export selected tracks. We could copy the media files or just reference the media files, and the difference being that we could actually include this WAV file, but if we know that that WAV file is going to be on the system, at that point we may just want to reference that, so it doesn't have to include that. So I'm going to come over here and we'll say be someone Vox Verb. Okay, and I'll save that to my desktop. So I'll save, and so if someone's like, "Oh, I loved like the whole effects chain. You put 12 different reverbs on it, and it was beautiful." And this could also include groups, and and if you wanted to include Midi tracks, you could do that. So you could mix different types of tracks. So I can go to a new project. We'll say, let's create project. I will come over here and let's say I want to import and you export selected tracks and you import a track archive. So it's a little weird with the naming configurations, but I'll just come here. So let's say be someone Vox Verb. So I hit OK, open, and I'll select all of the components. And now as I do that, we will play. So, and this will incorporate, and then I'll just not have this play in musical mode. Sorry about that. And so if you wanted to include different effect sends, that's when you would need to do like a track archive. If you wanted everything to be self-contained with inserts, channel strips, volume, panning, EQ, just a track preset will be sufficient. Okay, so we have a question mailed in. I have a Cubase tool request. When recording vocals, I always track at least 3 passes using lanes. When finished recording those parts, I then manually change each lane to a different color to better identify each take. I find this extremely helpful, having a client sitting behind me with the ability to say, can I hear the yellow verse or the blue first chorus? However, I would love to be able to color segments live as I'm recording to mark segments such as red for don't use parts, green for awesome words or phrases. The best that Cubase can seem to do at the moment is let me change the color for the whole take while recording. What I need is a way to select a segment such as using the range tool and be able to color mark it as if using a highlighter pen. I want to I don't want to have to use the range tool and split the segment and in order to color it. Can you please request this feature? So I understand kind of like while a track is recording that so currently you would need to you know, to have a different color in an event, you know, you could just select the range tool and shift X and then color accordingly. But I don't think that will allow you to do it kind of while it's recording, but I will pass this along. I know what a lot of people do is, let's say I have this color set here. So let's say, okay, we're doing our vocals in green, and we're tracking. So I think if we change the color, it may not even carry over. What I know a lot of people do in situations like this is just come over here, and they find, you know, they will just, you know, while they're tracking, is just to open up a marker track. And while they're working, they'll just say, okay, there was, let's say, as we're tracking here, at that point, you could just say, okay, there's something cool there. And you could even have like the marker track open. So I think it's, and make notes along. So you can say, okay, I just was here. I'm going to insert a marker, and, you know, this was, you know, bad, replace, and, you know, and just be able to, you know, drop your markers in like that. Say, cool vamp. So it won't necessarily recolor the parts. I will pass that along, but I think that it would still need to be cut. And I'm not sure, you know, if you wanted that to be to doing that where maybe the playhead position may change during a recording. So I think that's kind of the intention. So, you know, maybe, you know, if that feature gets implemented, but since it isn't currently now, I would maybe consider colorizing, and you could choose to come over here and colorize the markers so that you know that, you know, this is a good or bad marker color. So you could do that. So while this is recording, you know, just come right over here, Control M. Okay, let's drop the marker, and obviously you have a keyboard shortcut for this. And then select the marker while it's still recording, colorize it as you see fit. So that way you could navigate very quickly. Say, okay, I just want to go to here, to here, to there, and you could still see things pretty effectively. So I know it's not changing the actual part, but that may be kind of a workaround that you might be able to employ, Dan. All right, let's jump back to... and we had another question about automation and how to select automation points kind of at the top. So let's say if we have automation on this particular event. So someone was using kind of like how to select when we have the combined selection and range tool. And what the combined selection and range tool allow you to do is if you're at the bottom of a file, you could move the event and do, you know, your fade ins and fade outs, and you could do, you know, different, you know, event handles for volume. But when you're at the top, you could do range selection editing. So you can say, okay, I want to take this and move it in the middle. So instead of having to switch between these tools. So the question was how to edit automation that's up high when we have the combined selection tool. So if I start at the top, I don't actually move the events necessary, you know. So if I wanted to like raise or lower those, you could do that. But if you wanted to select them, instead of starting at the top, just start from the bottom. And now you could just select the events. So the higher events, instead of like, and it may seem kind of counterintuitive, like, okay, I just wanted to select this, but just kind of start the selection process from the bottom, and then you could select it and treat it differently than if you were starting from the top. So just instead of grabbing the top, So that will select the range. But if you actually come over here and let's say, okay, I just wanted to select a range, I can't really easily adjust the value down by dB. But if I select these events from the bottom, at that point, we could just come over here and see the range selection by the dB. So if I just wanted to select the value there of the automation, I could adjust. So instead of grabbing from the top, when the automation events are at the top, just grab from the bottom, and then you'll be able to see the automation and its values and adjust here accordingly. All right, let's go back to our live questions. Just jump back. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone's learning something new. Okay, just finding my place. All right, so we see someone's I am Ableton Gang, but I do own Cubase for iPad. Please don't kick me. Well, welcome to our live stream. If you have any questions, please let us know. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, I have a question. How can I connect my USB microphone with Cubase 11 Pro when I'm using a UR22 Mark II audio interface? So basically, the USB microphone is going to be another audio interface. So, like as we discussed a bit earlier, you could try to do two, like a two devices with an aggregate device, but with it, if you want to use a microphone with your UR22 Mark II, it's probably best to get a microphone that has an XLR output, and then you could use the excellent mic preamps that are included. So, USB microphones generally don't connect with a USB audio interface over USB. So, there are microphones that are hybrid. I think Samson makes one. The one I'm talking into right now is a Shure MV7, and that could work as XLR and USB simultaneously. So I use it so I don't have to constantly switch back and forth between my needs. So, but basically with the UR22, it's not going to accept the output from your USB microphone. So you could use your USB microphone and track. You could use the UR22 and track, but it could be a little messy to try to use both at the same time. So it's kind of, like buying, they're not, your USB microphone isn't capable of connecting to the UR22 if it's just USB. Okay, so I see from Jazz Dude, Greg, did I just see 663 preset KITRS kitters in Groove Agent 5? So let's take a look. Maybe. Okay, let me just... So I'm not sure if that is just kind of searching for the preset name here. Not sure if I see that one, Jazz Dude, but we'll just take a quick look. Let me know if you see the name. So I don't think anything with KRTRS or 663. I always felt bad for the people who had to come up with all the names for presets. So I'm not sure if you see that preset in there, Jazz Dude. Okay, so I just see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, for a large track that I want slivers for samples and Halion 5 considers the entire track. Is it best to create a parallel track to drag the slices into so that Halion ignores the rest? So if it's still a sliced audio file, so if you come up, let me just jump back to another one of the recent projects here. So as we do some slices here, let's say. Okay, so now if we go into our part editor, let me just get Halion up. Let's see if we turn it into parts. Yeah, so I think until we actually, that you might just want to, just do a render in place for that new particular file. I mean, you could do slicing inside, and while it may take a little bit, Halion is only going to be dealing with a one particular slice, even though the file may be larger. So I don't think it's really going to add significant overhead if you don't have it, broken down into individual audio files. All right, so we have a question from Fred Robinson. Can you demo how to use the arranger track? Okay, so we have a type of track called an arranger track. So let's say and how to work with this is if we add the arranger track, we can come over here and define different sections of the song. So I can say this is going to be our solo, and all of our arranger events will show up here. And I think you have to hold down like Alt or Option to name it. So let's say, okay, I wanted this to be the guitar solo, and we could name these different parts. Now, each of these parts can have nested parts within it, a nested part within the nested part, within the nested part, within the nested part, etc. And the concept here is that when people are working, that they, we have many people that do, let's say, music for advertising. And you probably see this a lot where there may be a 60-second version of a commercial, a 30-second, a 15-second, a 5-second version for different media. So they may have to, compose music for each of those different time lengths. So it could be the same piece of music that is used for multiple delivery formats that, or let's say an extended dance remix, or like in the old days, they used to cut down a lot of songs so that it would get played on radio because it couldn't be more than 4 minutes and get played on radio. So they would often, cut out different parts of songs so that it could get radio airplay. So what we want to do is to define our different sections of the song. And as we define our different sections, we could drag these into different play orders. And I think we could have 16 different play orders if you want it. So instead of playing straight linearly through, once we open up like our arranger track, I could activate this mode. And once we activate the arranger mode, what this will do is instead of playing in a straight linear fashion, it will play back in a non-linear fashion. So what does that mean? So now I could come over here. Instead of it going on, I could just repeat that section.
All at once, you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make it fall?
And you could just try out kind of different ideas.
Before I knew.
Different arrangements.
All at once, you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make it feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to give you their heart. Feel
And you could do annoying stuff like this. So that way you could just, define different sections of the song, and then you could just drag them up here to create different arrangements without having, true, you could manually copy all of the parts over if you were so inclined. And then you could, just come over here if you wanted to. There'll be different settings. So you could say, okay, each of these can also be triggered via Midi messages from the generic remote, so that you could, if you're in a live performance situation and you have like a Midi footboard, you could have it, repeat this section of the song over and over again, loop it until you turn it off, go to the next, play to the end of this one and stop, go to the next song in a set. Many people will also use this for live use, and they will have each song in the set as an arranger chain. So they'll just say, this is song 1, song 2, song 3. And then if they change the set list, they would just simply come here and say, oh, okay, we're putting this song as our 4th song today. And you could just come over here and just change the whole set. And once you're done with the arranger chain, if you wanted to make this into a linear arrangement instead of a non-linear arrangement that jumps around, once you come here, you could just click on flatten chain, and we could have that, go directly into the current project or make a new project. And at that point, that will turn your non-linear arrangement that's kind of jumping all around into a linear arrangement. But you could have one arrangement and just, say if you're auditioning different arrangement ideas for the client, you could set up, multiple arrangements and just say, oh, do you like this one? Do you like this one? This fits in, here's two ideas to make it, our 7-minute song, fit into 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So that's kind of some of the stuff that you could do with the arranger track. So it's a really cool feature, Cubase. All right. I see that Michael Teams has granted me 4 scoops of unbelievably rich and decadent cherries Jubilee Limeade ice cream. We have to give Michael Teams just such great credit and kudos for his ice cream flavors. So thank you for that, Michael. All right, so I have a question. It says, I have Absolute 4. Does it include the Percussion Agent? I can't find it. Cubase 11 Pro Max. So yes, it does, and we'll give you that feature free. To find the Percussion Agent, you want to just come over here. Let's say we want to, it's part of Groove Agent, so it's one of the agents within Groove Agent. So come over here, we'll open up Groove Agent. I'm going to right click and we'll load Kit with Patterns. And I'll just choose my instrument sets. And if you look at the pictures, you'll see like the Percussion Agent here. So once we have that, then you could just come right over here, and then your Percussion Agent will be visible and ready to go. And it will come with all of its own patterns as well. So you could just... So it's just one of the library of instruments directly within. So if you just kind of right click on the agent, or if you go to the media bay, we could probably do it. Let's go to Groove Agent, and then you'll see Percussion Agent probably in here. These might be just the add-on libraries. So, but yeah, just right click here and load Kit with Patterns, and then you can see Percussion Agent. So it's a great tool. All right, so we're seeing Cubase Junkie saying my favorite feature, Groove Agent 5 full version, is a note repeat and how you can manipulate the acoustic drums to make them sound how you want them to sound. So yeah, it's very flexible. All right, it's great that Wheelie Bear Paul could join us on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. And since we have a lot of discussion on Groove Agent, Jazz Dude's pointing out that Groove Agent, the full version, is currently on sale. So a question, anyone know the best ways to keep your VSTs up to date, like Retrolog 2, Halion Sonic, Pad Shop, etc.? Does Download Manager do it for you? So you could often see like in the news, so like when you start a project in Cubase, you'll go to the hub here. And, as we see different, news items, you could come over here and just say, oh, what's new in Cubase 11, or there's a maintenance update for 11.03. So it'll be indicated there. It won't automatically update it for you. Some people like that, some people don't. But you could just kind of keep an eye out and, check your versions and download if you need to. But generally, there will be an announcement in the Steinberg hub. Okay, so we see from John Costigan, sorry if I missed your question earlier. Have I made a mistake by rendering Midi before the retard Alfine? So generally it's probably best to do all of the, to do all of the tempo manipulation before you render the file. So, if you still have the MIDI data, just simply, do the retard and, re-render or, freeze the track again. And, it's not that big a deal if you still have the original MIDI stuff. See, Michael Pierce is so close to hitting buy at the moment, I think, for Groove Agent. So yeah, you should definitely do it. You owe it to yourself to get Groove Agent full version. So. All right, so we see from Mance Chills, please, I have a question to ask, and it sound complicated. So yeah, go ahead and ask. Maybe I'll see it in the future, like down in the discussion. But yeah, please ask any questions. All right, so we have a question. How would you set up multiple reverb sends? For example, having a long reverb and a short reverb. So sometimes, people may just kind of do it on one send, depending if you needed them separated. But let's go ahead and take a quick look. So there's kind of two approaches that you could do. All right, so say if I wanted to create a send, one is you could just come over here and say, okay, I wanted to do, let's say, a reverence. So I'm just going to right click and say, let's do it to our selected track. So let's say I'll start off, I'm going to add an effects channel to the selected track. Let's add a reverence. All right, so say this is probably maybe like a shorter reverb. Now, once we've added that reverence, this will basically show up as an effects channel. If you wanted them to kind of be layered together, we can go to our inserts and I can see the reverence. But if I wanted to have a layer of maybe a longer reverb, so let's say I wanted to go to Roomworks, and I wanted this to be so now as we come over here, let's just take this so I could have kind of a longer haul and a let's just do something really so this reverb is providing short, and long. So I could do one effect send to the track, and this would send it to both. Or if you wanted to send it to two independent effects, I could come here. Let's just say our short, and now I wanted to add an effects channel track to the selected channels. And here I wanted, like, let's say I'll do just a revelation this time. So now this send is short, and this one is, let's say, longer. And then you could balance the two here. And let's say if you wanted, like on the large hall, if you wanted that to have, let's say, you know, a gate after it, we could go to your dynamics. And we could kind of set a gate amount there if you wanted to. So other things that you could do. So those are two approaches to doing like a long and a short reverb. Okay, so just see, okay, briefly, I'm done mixing a project, but I want to reverse to the beginning before I started the mix. Is there a way to get it at that point or even close to that point? Okay, so let's say if we've done a mix and we're all kind of in one particular session. So let me just jump back to... All right, so there's a couple approaches for this. So let's say I'm, doing my mix here, and let's say, okay, I'm just going to be starting off, and maybe I wanted to maintain kind of the initial value. Okay, so before you start, let's say, okay, like I want this, I'm in my mix console here. Before I start, we could take a snapshot. So let's say if I've now and let's say I wanted to go back to my initial snapshot. At this point, I could just say recall snapshot 1. So I could take kind of a, now because it is a snapshot, it's not going to include automation. So just be aware of that. Just like a still picture doesn't include video. So you could start off and take like an initial snapshot if you want. But let's say if I've done mixing for a couple of hours, and this includes like, okay, I wanted to adjust, insert effects. Now everything that I'm doing, if we go to the history tab, say I'll just add it. And everything that I just kind of do randomly here will be showing up in this mixer recall. So I could just come right over here and just kind of scroll back through all my steps in the mix until you last save the project. So if I just want to come here, so adding effects. So you do have an unlimited undo history for every stage, every parameter, everything that you've done in the mix console for you. So if you wanted to jump back, you could definitely do it like that. So. Okay. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so we have a question. Now that I have Spectral Layer 7 and I'm recording all tapes and cleaning up the mess, and I could use some advice. All right, so let's say, I'll just do a new project. Let's say if I have some bad tape stuff I wanted to clean up. Okay, so let's say we have like a classical piece here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this in Spectral Layer. So I'll just come over here. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of just listen to it. We can kind of see some of the harmonic content to what's going on here. So if we wanted to kind of just take away, so let's go ahead and just kind of play this. And what we want to do is maybe isolate the hiss. Okay, so what I could do now is if we come over to noise reduction, we can say register the noise. And now that we do that, we could just say noise reduction. And you could do that multiple times if you need to. So where we were before. So once again, just kind of find, and after a while you could get good at kind of just reading it. So and kind of seeing the visual displays of it. So let's see. So I'll just kind of select that particular area, register the noise. If we undo that. It's a pretty dramatic difference there. Okay, so we have a question from Benjamin. Hi, Greg. Is there a key command or project logical editor command or commands for selecting all events on lane in the Midi key editor, CC1 or 11, and not all that have been used? Thanks so much. Okay, so let's say we have... So I guess this is on for like a CC data. So let's add... So let's say I have just a quick part here. Okay, so let's say if we have modulation and let's say expression. All right, so let's say if I just come here. All right, so I think we want to just say select all MIDI CC 11. All right, so let's come to the MIDI logical editor. And we're going to say under function, select, and type is equal to controller. And value 1 of the controller we'll say is going to be equal to 11. So now if I come over here and hit apply, it'll select all of my CC11. If I have this set to do CC1, I could just come right over here and just select all of the MIDI CC1. And let me just make sure that's... yeah, so let me know if that works for you, but you could save those as presets as well. All right, we see Jazz Dude's been on top of moderation as needed. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so you see Michael Pierce has his second revelation today, selecting from the bottom. Amazing. Thanks, Greg. Yeah. Took me a while to figure that out too, so don't feel bad. All right, and just so people know, I'm about 37 minutes behind the chat, so I'm trying to catch up. Okay, so I just see for Jazzu says there's a misunderstanding. There are 663 chat presets in Groove Agent. Yeah, and I have some of the extra libraries like Simon Phillips and Marco Miniman. So, but there are a lot. Okay, just saw an email come in. I see a couple emails. Let me just see. What about selecting the upper part? Okay, so I just had an email coming in. So we did cover that about the selection with the multi-tool. So we just covered that just a few minutes ago. So but quickly, so just this email came in again. If you have automation and you have the multi-tool selected here. So to select the automation points, instead of selecting from the top, just select from below and go up. So we just had an email just kind of pop in again. Okay, reading through some more questions. All right. Okay, so from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, then can an audio file be considered a sample for Hallion 6? It does seem way easier to drag MIDI samples, audio samples from MediaBay into Hallion rather than creating new samples. So yeah, if you have the audio file, so let's say if I'm just come right over here to my instrument track, so if I would just want to go to Hallion, so we could take any sample from MediaBay and just drag it right over, and then so yeah, very easy to do. And now we could just see if we go to edit and look at the sample. So that's all you had to do. Okay, Cubase Junkie wants people to hit the like button, and he just also saying thanks for that he needs to start using the arranger track, and also Fred Robinson does as well, so that's great. All right, so we have a question from Keith Young. Great to see you on the live stream. The contents of Groove Agent 5 is 31 gigs. Can I delete Groove Agent 4 without affecting projects that used 4, or does 5 simply replace 4? I believe that it will automatically replace, but I haven't tried it in probably 6 or 7 years. But I think that the Groove Agent 5 will automatically try it. I don't have Groove Agent 4 installed on this machine to give it a test, but you could give it a quick test if you wanted to as well. But I'm inclined to say it does, but I wouldn't guarantee it. But I'm pretty sure that it will automatically just kind of migrate it to Groove Agent 5. All right, we see Fred's having to check out, so thanks for joining us. We have Tubular 917 joining us. All right. All right, so we have Vira Studios. It says, hey, first time I made it to the live stream, so welcome. We're glad you can make it. Feel free to ask any questions. So I think that we see from Gareth how much is on sale. So I think the Groove Agent is... People are saying it's 50% off, so you could check what it is in Spain for you, Gareth, or your other countries just by going to the Steinberg shop. All right, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, I will get Wavelab Cast now that it's on sale and wish it was included in Absolute 5 since I have Absolute 4 OL soon enough. So, Absolute is really kind of intended for, to be an instrument library, and Wavelab Cast is really checked out for, like a really different purpose. So I think it makes sense that it's not included. It's kind of different intention. So, Absolute is, a collection of virtual instruments and sounds, or that's what Absolute is, and Wavelab Cast is a different thing. But yeah, wait till tomorrow, so there could be some interesting news with Wavelab Cast. So I'll give you a hint. All right. All right, so I just see Michael Team's Reverb and Revelation. All right, and Gareth saying Revelation. All right. All right, so we see from Captenergy Music, hey guys, if you're planning on buying a new copy of any Steinberg instrument, check to see what the difference would be to upgrade to Absolute if you're eligible. Really love the Absolute, so it's a great idea. So often the price of one instrument is the upgrade price for Absolute. So it's a great deal. Okay, so we see from Vira Studios, can you explain the difference between the Elastic versions? Okay, so what Elastic is going to allow you to do, it's an algorithm for, stretching audio to make it fit. So let's say if I wanted to come over here, so we can think of these as three different categories. So we have time, pitch, and tape, and these fall into the three categories. So we have efficient. So this may not be the super highest quality mode, but it will allow you to do more tracks. And this may have been more relevant like when these algorithms were introduced in Cubase SX3, I believe. And then we have formant, and that's going to be preserving formant. And then we have kind of the normal algorithm. So we have kind of three different stages. One will be a higher quality, one will use less CPU, and one will preserve the formants. And formants are kind of like if you heard like your voice, like as you raise it, if it goes like it sounds like you're very young and sounds a bit unnatural, you think of like munchkins, people call it munchkinitis, or when it sounds a bit unnatural or changing gender, like making someone older sound younger or vice versa, that could be gender. So we have time and pitch. So we could think of time as being for more rhythmic material, pitch being for, probably vocals, violins, saxophones, bass. So if you had to do time stretching to speed up something that was on drums, I would probably choose time. And if I was doing it for vocals, I would probably have the vocals on pitch. And then we have tape. And what tape does is it mimics an analog tape machine. So if you did variable speeds on an analog tape machine, you could record slower. And as you play back audio from a tape machine, as you speed it up, the pitch rises as the speed increases. As it's slowed down, the pitch would lower. And that's exactly kind of what the tape algorithm does, is it mimics analog tape for that. Okay. Okay, so we see a question from Cubase Junkie. Hey, Greg, can you show us how to take out the lower portion of the reverb but keep the higher aspects of the reverb by using the Cubase Multiband Imager? Okay, so, you know, if you wanted to put that on like the reverb send, so let's say, I'll just jump back. You know, so if you want reverb only on, you know, to not do the full frequency spectrum, you could, you know, come over and just use like a multiband plugin, like a multiband imager is a good choice. So let's say I have this particular file and I'll add, let's say, a big reverb on it. Okay, so I go to my reverb send. If I wanted to minimize the low frequencies, I would go to the reverb return channel. Let's go to the inserts. And I will just open up the Imager plugin. So now if I wanted to just come over here and mute, you could, you know, at that point, just say you wanted to have, you know, particular frequency ranges, and I could say I just wanted to solo. So that way I could just solo different frequency ranges. And we could choose for this to be like 2-band. So I could just solo, make the reverb sound brighter so the reverb isn't going into that particular frequency range. Or if I wanted the reverb sound darker, I could turn this on. Now, another situation can occur where maybe if you have something like a drum loop and you only wanted it to do reverb, you know, where it's a source and you wanted it to, I think I have a project file, and you wanted to not have the reverb affect different. Let me see if I can find this project here. Like if you don't want the kick to go through the reverb, but the rest of a drum loop too. Okay, so here's the project I was thinking of. All right, so let's say if we have a so if I wanted to come here and I didn't want the like I didn't want the kick to go through. So what I could do is just come over here, and here I have on the reverb return channel, I just have the Imager plugin, and I have it broken down to 2 bands, and one of the bands is soloed. So now we're not hearing the reverb on the kick, but just on the... So... But if I wanted it now on all the frequencies, you can kind of filter the reverb. So now it's on all of the frequencies of the loop. But if you have a source where you just wanted to add it on particular frequencies, that's another kind of workflow that you could do. All right, reading through comments. All right. Thanks for all the great questions. If you learned something, make sure that you hit the like button. Just gonna do a quick. So I see we're at 96 likes. Let's see if we can get to 100 here. That'd be great. All right, so I just see, will the history clear after I close the project, or will it be there when I open the same project? So I think the edit history will be there until the project is saved, I believe. And then the mix console history will be kind of reset at that point. So I just see from Gareth, can supervision remove distortion as well? So I think it's really intended to kind of show you stuff, but not necessarily, I don't think it's really intended to change the sound, but it's really kind of more, it could often show where distortion is going to be, but I don't think it will actually choose to remove sound. So. Okay, so I just see from BD Music Official, reverb technique, please. So if you could tell me what reverb technique you want, or we just showed kind of how to add reverb, but if there's a particular reverb technique that you want to know, I'd be happy to show it. Okay. Can recorded audio MIDI be moved between different projects? So certainly. So let's say if I have this project here, let's say I have this project open. There's a number of ways to do it. So let's say I have audio and MIDI from this project. I could just drag and drop right to another project. You could also come over here and just say I want to import tracks from project, and I will just go here to the projects and say, okay, I just want it to have like my vocal and the piano. I could just come over here and just import those particular tracks from a different project as well. So a couple different ways of taking MIDI and audio parts from one project to another. Okay. Hey Greg, my controller keyboard, Akai MPK249, sends the controller data CC114 on the loop button. How can I connect this sysx event with the loop button in Cubase? So I don't think it's sysx, but I think it's just going to be, it's just going to be a MIDI controller. So let's go to your studio setup and let's go to generic remote. So let's say, I think I had something that was spitting out 114. Let me just take a look on my controller here quickly. Okay, so let's say I have controller 114 here. So let's say I'll just do 108 here. Okay, so now I have like that particular controller. It could be anything. Let's go to our generic remote. So we're going to go to studio setup. Let's go to generic remote. So I will just click on learn. So just hit the button. So you'll see controller 114, click on learn. And then what you want that to do is go to transport and then device. And then you could just say, I want to activate cycle. All right. All right, so say at this point we will call it cycle. I'll just type it in. Okay, and hit apply and okay. And now every time you could just hit that button. So controller 108 is now controlling and activating loop on and off, just like that. So once again, studio setup, and then you could use the same window to map, all different functions on your controller to do, so think of this as the input for the controller, what MIDI message is coming in and what you want that MIDI message to do at the bottom. So question, is there any update/upgrade path for spectral layers from Cubase 11 Pro, or do I need to pay for the full version? There are different promotions that go on currently, but I don't think that there is, I think if you had Spectral Layers Elements, like a paid version, that you could do it, but since the Spectral Layers 1 is a OEM version basically that comes with it, and you didn't necessarily purchase it, but it was a part of the Cubase license, that I don't think it qualifies for an update or upgrade. But look for various sales that go on throughout the year. There was a Spectral Layer sale earlier in the year. So we see a question in the notepad. Can the fonts be changed and make it bold and underlined? Thanks. I'm not sure if it could be changed. Let's come over here. So let's just go. I think it's under project, notepad. So I don't think, let me just, that there's like a bold or italics, italics like you would see in a word processor. But I think you can. So let's say if I just typed a bunch of random gibberish, I think that there. So I don't think it can be. I'll kind of mention it along. I mean, we've had people complain like they don't have spell check and a thesaurus in the notepad, but which it's not intended to be a word processor. But I think that's. But you can do this if once you do it, you could export the notepad data as a standard text file. And once you export it as a text file, and that you could change the font and underline there for use outside of Cubase. So we see, is there a way to record Groove Agent by pressing the button with the mouse? Let's take a look. Okay, so let's say if we're here. All right, so if you wanted to just. All right, so I'm going to set the input port here to Groove Agent. I'll just sell the track. So once you have, the MIDI input port here set to Groove Agent, and I'll just take auto quantize off. So you could just see the MIDI data here. And now everything that I just played from the pads will show up as data directly in Groove Agent, but you need to have the MIDI port here defined as the Groove Agent that you're recording from, and then you could just click on the pads and record those sounds directly into Cubase. All right, we see Mark Rabin is joining from his phone. All right. All right, so we see from Marvel Jam, when is Yamaha going to donate a virtual RY30 for Groove Agent? Groove Agent expansion seems like a perfect place to celebrate Yamaha vintage catalog. Just my 2 cents. So we'll pass that along. I'm not sure, we haven't had many people that wanted like an RY30 kit, but it should be easy enough to do. But I'm not sure what the other repercussions of that are. Could be old contracts and stuff like that. So question, can I remove Groove Agent SE if I purchase the full version? You can, but the actual Groove Agent doesn't take much, but it's a pretty small program. The content is what kind of takes a lot of the space, so you don't really free up you don't really free up a lot of space, you know, getting rid of Groove Agent SE. And if someone sends you a project that has Groove Agent SE referenced in it, that won't automatically open up Groove Agent. So if you do a lot of collaborative work, think of that. All right, great to see Sable Winters on the live stream. Thanks for joining. Okay, so you see, would Elastic Pro Tape be the algorithm to select for a tape stop effect? If possible, can you demonstrate it? You could do that. There's also some other tools that will come inside of Cubase that do that quite well. But if you wanted to do that, let me just open up. See if I have this project open in my recent list. No, so let me just do it real quick. So, you know, if everything was kind of set to, we just go into the pool here. Or I'll just do it on our project so I don't have to set 100 audio files with the... Okay, so if we have this like a 2-track, I'll just do it on a 2-track just for demonstration purposes. Not that you're limited to that. But I'll set this to Elastic Tape. So I will come over here and just do like add a tempo track. So let's say right there, I just wanted to draw in a point at a particular, and let's say I just wanted to do just a quick ramp. And then right back up. So if I want to do this, I'll put this into musical mode this time. So that way, if you wanted to just kind of come over here to your audio event, so I could pitch up. And if you wanted that to last longer, you could just kind of. So that's one method of doing it with tape. So, you know, I've had this where customers have had like old recordings where the tape machine was running too fast or too slow, and they wanted it to, you know, get back to the proper pitch so they could just kind of change the tempo slightly, and it worked really well for them. If you wanted to do a lot of tape stop effects, though, you know, one of the tools that works, you know, extremely well for that is a plugin. It's under the other category called Loop Mash FX. So as I wanted to just kind of come here, and I just put this on the master bus, but if you wanted to just grab this plugin, and you could actually play this in real time for MIDI, but if you wanted to do and you could change kind of the pulse of it, so if you want it. Or go and do chops. So this may be like better for doing like tape drops, so you could do it like that. So both tools can kind of get you there, but if you want it for like really kind of this type of processing, the loop mash is a great choice. If you're doing kind of more correction and you want to actually, you know, mimic an analog tape machine versus kind of like this, where it's a very processed intentional sound, then, you know, loop mash effects may be a better solution. We see from Cubase Chunky, this is golden. So, all right, so I'm about 22 minutes behind the live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Reading through more comments. Thanks. All right, so we're seeing from Cubase Chunky that the imager is very powerful. Yeah, and it's wonderful to have a multi-band imager just as a great plug-in to make your bass more focused. Okay, so I see Gareth is just saying that spectral layers is good for removing distortion. So yeah, spectral layers is better than supervision. Okay, reading through more comments. See, Gareth is getting supervision and spectral layers confused. So he's getting the word super and spectra confused. So it can happen. So. You see the jazz dude is saying it's time for a dose of triple espresso made cappuccino. I say, you can't talk coffee when I have 38 minutes left still. Not fair. Okay, so just see, how can I edit the velocity of MIDI notes quickly in the key editor? Is there a shortcut for that without using the velocity lane? Okay, so that's good. Take a quick. Okay, so let's say, so depending on the type of velocity editing, if you have all the notes selected, you could just come right here in the info line and change the velocity. If you wanted to, let's say, for instance, if we had chords, so let's say if I come here and all right, so let's say if I have a bunch of notes here, one other thing you could do to change the velocity, if you select a note, you could adjust the velocity here. You could also just kind of select a note. I think it's Control plus Shift, and then you could adjust the velocity, sometimes editing it graphically. So if you just hold down Control and Shift, you could adjust the velocity directly on the note right there. Just by going up or down. So, think of selecting the note, doing it from the info line, or just Control Shift, and you could adjust the velocity directly there as well. And that's really helpful for chords, or maybe one note is sticking out and you look at all the notes and it's like, or drums and you're like, which velocity is the snare, which is the E in the chord, the third in the chord. You could just kind of grab it here and just adjust up or down the velocity. So, but let me know if there's another, if that makes sense for your workflow. If not, so we see from Jazz Dude, Howling 6 is a real deep rabbit hole. That is, and you could build your own synth in it. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. We see a lot of, some composers. Danny Lux comes to mind, who's, started building his own sounds for his work and compositions, and then just released libraries based on that. So he's probably one of the most prolific TV composers in the world. I think it's like 6,000 hours of stuff he's done for primetime TV. Something ridiculous. So we see someone that's just saying, hey, who dared give the thumb down? So maybe it was the person who got kicked out for spreading unnecessary stuff, or someone got mad at me for not answering their question immediately. So. Reading through comments. See from Best Korean Jesus, thanks so much for answering the beginner questions. Hard to Google and use Cubase index on really simple issues I face. That's fine. It's exactly why we do these. So, and we find that, you know, what is a simple question for someone is a revelation for someone else. So, okay, so we just see what is the full version of Groove Agent called? Is it Groove Agent SE or regular Groove Agent? So we could think of SE as Starter Edition. So Halion Sonic SE is the starter edition of Halion Sonic. Groove Agent SE is the starter edition of Groove Agent. So we could just call it Groove Agent 5. So you see that Gareth is picked our studio when Hot Mess gets our 360-degree deal. So that'd be good. Be fun to record in England. So and hang out with Michael Pierce. Okay, reading some more. Just reading through more questions. See that Michael or that Jeff Zabelski's and the Grand was inspiration for getting the Absolute 4 and say, oh, yeah, it's a wonderful piano. You see from Fab saying Cubase is so musical and great sounding, not only retrolog, which indeed is one of my faves too, but also simple channel strip functionality I wish I had in Logic. Only the EQ is there in Logic. So. You see that Michael Pierce is talking about his lovely 414s, as they say in England, and not 414s, as we say in America. All right, so I think I'm caught up. Let's see if there's other questions that come through. All right, but I know we had some questions that were mailed in. Let me see if I can get to some of those. Okay, so we answered that one already. Let me just see if there's another one that was sent in. Okay, we covered that one. Let me just go back to our live stream. And see if there's more topics that come in. If not, we could wrap up a little early and find out. So we see any idea when Cubase 11.5 will be released. So generally they don't announce in advance when new versions are out. So we just kind of wait until it's ready and ready to be, delivered for the end users. And that's when we make the announcements. Okay, so let's see if we have more questions. If not, we can wrap up a little early. Thanks for all the great discussions, and we'll be doing another live stream on Friday. Okay, so I just see, is there a way to check if the gain of audio signal coming to plugin is not too hot? Some plugins show that, some don't. So it's really, we send kind of the same gain to the plugin, so it could really be more how the actual plugin itself is showing, its input signal. So, it's, if applicable, not all plugins will be affected so much by gain, and some could be very sensitive to gain. So, and generally those that are kind of sensitive to gain will, have in some kind of metering. All right. So I just see a question, Greg, do you produce music? Where can we listen to it? So I don't really do, I haven't done production stuff in a long time, decades. But I did, I do play some bass. So you can check out Hot Mess. You can see it's with Gareth. You see Gareth K, who's on, I think it's Gareth K Music, who's on the live stream, and Michael Teams, who gives out the ice cream, and Pablo, who plays drums, who's not on the live stream today. But I played bass on that, so you could listen to that. It's Hot, H-O-T-T Mess, M-E-S-S. You could check that out. I think it's on most of the streaming services. And Gareth has a new release coming out. I think I played bass on 4 tracks, but I've also done some, if you check out the Eric Clapton's Crossroads project, I was an audio engineer on that from 2004. So you could check that out. So I got to record Eric Clapton live. So, and Eric Johnson, who's a lot of fun, and John Mayer, some other people. All right. We'll see if there's more questions coming in. If not, we will. Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Zabelski. What are several functions that make VCA useful to beginning users? All right. All right, let me just. All right, so it used to be kind of before we had actual automated, actual automated consoles that, it was actually kind of set up where we could, there weren't, motorized faders per se in consoles. So a lot of the consoles were kind of based on VCA. And VCAs are, a lot of people are like, what is the difference between a VCA and a group? So if we wanted to look at what a VCA can do that a group, so let's say I have, let's say I go to my snare track here, and I have a send. So let's say I want to put on, I'll just make this reverb a little more significant here. All right, so, quickly, if you have a lot of automation going on in your track, so let's say I look at my drums and I see that I have kind of automation going in contrary motions. A lot of times if I take all of my drums and let's say if I assign these to a group, so I'm going to add a group channel, and let's say I create a stereo group. So I come here. We could still have the reverb. As I bring tracks down, the reverb can still, have its relationship. But with the VCA, this is where it gets to be really cool. Let me just go back to my... Just revert this quickly here so I don't do tons of rerouting. So what a VCA can do is I could take all of my drums here. So I'll take this to all my kicks and I'll assign a VCA to these. And now that I have this done, I could bring let's say I'll solo the VCA. And I'll just go to that snare track and let's add a lot more verb. I'll just put a different preset here so it's more obvious. So if we have existing automation, now I could kind of bring down the VCA fader and the automation can still go up. But notice that the effects level going, to the snare especially is not altered here because the VCA is not summing. So I could adjust the different levels here and still maintain the exact signal balance going into my effect sends. Now, if I had automations, I could also automate the VCAs so that when I go to automate this, I could bring this down and tracks, even as I'm going down or if I'm going up, the existing automation is kind of going. So even if it's going in contrary motion to the fader here. Whereas a lot of times when people link, they actually will just, link everything together and then everything can kind of jump or kind of keep a relative value. But it doesn't necessarily keep its contrary automation. Now, as we look at the automation, I could see that we have the channel automation and we see what is the result of the VCA on the automation. So on the VCA, I could now just combine take the result of the VCA automation and apply that. So if you've done a very complex mix with lots of automation elements and you want to bring the whole thing slightly down or slightly up and still maintain the relationship, the gain structure between the sources, the tracks, and the reverb sends, that's when the VCA can come in really helpful. All right. So we have, let's see, question, complete beginner question, working on a project with a bunch of orchestration VSTs. Should I render each track in place for better performance or just complete project and export audio mix down? So if if you're able to get through the whole project, there's no need to render it in place. So when people start rendering, each track is when, they're getting to the point where they won't be able to play the project. So at that point, that's when you start rendering. So if you're kind of hitting that brick wall of your real-time audio performance, at that point, you would start to render tracks to offload the real-time audio performance to continue to work. So, but if you get through the whole project, you don't have to do that and just do a final audio export mixdown. Okay, so I think I've reached the end of the questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that come in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up a little early. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Again, we'll be doing this on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And we'll just... All right, so we see Andy P saying, thanks, Greg. Very useful. So you're welcome. And we'll see if there's any other last minute questions. If not, we'll wrap up. All right, so we see someone missed the last 5 minutes listening to the Hot Mess Voodoo Moon. Nice. Okay. See people wanting me to enjoy my coffee, so I have to see how my son's day at school went. I hear him running upstairs. All right, with that, I guess I'll just wait just a little longer because I know there's a delay that happens when, by the time I talk, but if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and I'll switch over and we'll wrap up. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learned new stuff and has some new tricks to make their Cubase projects better. And we'll see everyone on Friday.